Hello, everybody. This is Tom Bronak. You can see my picture and my contact information down here. Today, we're going to talk about dashboards. And dashboards can be used for the infrastructure, your system development lifecycle, your production operations, your recovery operations, and your compliance. And today, I'm going to show you how we all fit together. I've just finished a large project that was global in nature. It crossed continents, countries, cultures, and language, and it was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week type of thing. But the project was in phases. We had to get the contract. We had to, in essence, inventory all of the physical locations the customer had because they were all over the world and they were not all under the customer's control. And of course, one of the goals of this project was to gain control of his environment and to properly control the environment moving forward. So we had to build 3 production centers. One was in Asia, one was in Europe, and one was for the Americas. We had to move the equipment from the original location to the production site and verify that it still was working between the production site and the end user. Then we built a recovery data center, and then we had to test that the production data centers could be recovered at the recovery data center. And of course, this is all virtualized, so we went from a metal environment to a virtualized environment. And then the disaster recovery process moved forward where we had application recovery certification. We had business continuity for sites and locations, and we had IT recovery, risk management, emergency management, rest them all in the disaster recovery arena. And in the compliance area, we had to adhere to all of the laws and regulations in the countries where we conducted business. In essence, this whole project was geared to be an enterprise resiliency and corporate certification project. As I had said, we took the original locations, inventoried everything, and moved these locations into the site, the production site that they were responsible for residing in. We also had to worry about controlling resources, including applications and a lot of other things, as I'll explain. We created a global applications repository or catalog, and where we had the application listed by the region they were in, and then their names and their criticality and so on. We had to develop a brand new systems development lifecycle, which I kind of liked, but it was a lot of effort. We had to develop disaster recovery and business continuity plans to protect the critical assets. We had to develop an asset management system so we can acquire resources, redeploy the resources, and terminate the resources. There are lots of projects going on, and the project management office needed a way to control them. And once we created the dashboard, it proved to be very, very helpful to them. In the process of building the data centers, we became 100% green LEED certified through our infrastructure savings. We basically eliminated paper. We optimized the library management and the controls, but that didn't happen right away. It came down the line. So we created an inventory of everything, and we transformed everything to a virtualized environment. It really made the recovery process a lot easier than it ever was before, and I've been doing this for a lot of years. Projects included people, continents, countries, cultures speaking many languages in all time zones. It was the project was mostly performed through remote meetings and conference calls. And controlling documentation was the biggest problem we had. So first, how do we build the data centers? We took a look at all the recovery, all the user sites, and we created that inventory by location. We combined the inventory into the region that they were going to, and we calculated their size required for that production data center based on the end user needs. Then we simply copied or transported the end user environment to the production data center and validated that the end user can still do their work instead of being connected to an outside vendor, but now to an inside controlled production environment. Then we wanted to do recovery. So we calculated the recovery, the production environment sizes, determined what critical applications had to be backed up, what their size characteristics were, and their resource requirements. After calculating the recovery size, we created an available resource pool, which is a pool of resources that would be dedicated to a recovery process. Why I developed the dashboard. The project was slipping in its schedule and productivity was being lost due to inaccurate and misleading documentation. It was really terrible. Too much time was spent in conference calls and remote meetings where people did not have the right data in front of them. In essence, we lost a lot of time having a meeting where we made no headway whatsoever, and we may have made a negative direction because it boiled down to, you said this, you said that, I didn't get this, and it was terrible. Confusion was rampant. Nobody trusted the literature, and got to the point nobody trusted each other, which affected work functions, status reporting, and the delivery schedule. Management was getting very upset because they were not receiving straight answers and could not examine project data directly. So if I can't trust what you tell me, let me see the data, I'll come up with my own opinion. Costs were getting out of hand and workflow tracking was not being performed. There was no way to improve efficiency following our current path. Well, the company and its reputation were in great peril because the final goal of having a virtual environment that could recover all tiers of applications was nowhere in sight. I gave this some thought and I saw that the dashboard as a tool I could use to help clients succeed better. I'll show you how. By utilizing the dashboard, what I did was I simply gathered all of the data associated with the projects going on and put it into a repository. Then I created a dashboard between the repository and people. So whenever somebody needed information, they would go to their dashboard, click on the link to that data, and the data would be provided to them. Again, anytime, any place, anywhere. So he or she could look at the data, and if they wanted to make an update, they would go back to the dashboard, and a dashboard manager would make the update and save the old document into an archive, and then store a new document with the same name as the old document into the library. Why was that important? It maintained links, and I'll show you more about that in a second. So by utilizing dashboards, what happened? We guaranteed accurate and current data. It was viewable from any location at any time. It reduced the need for many conference calls and remote meetings. It also allowed management to gather status information anytime they wanted. It improved the efficiency of the people performing these projects. It reduced costs greatly, and it just ensured people that the data was correct, and it made their confidence level go up. During remote meetings and conference calls, anytime there was a question about something, we could simply pull up the data and everybody could examine it together. All of the data, or in some cases, the data allowed drill down to the current activity for a task being performed, and it allowed you directly to connect to the person. If you have a thing called link, if you see the person's name there, you can click on link, and it would give you the name, the title, the phone number. But I'll show we can do it many ways. And we found that this was the most efficient method for coordinating projects and real-time activities. Well, in the process of doing that, I realized that dashboards can be created for everything. We had problems with forms management. Everybody does. It's the old story. I know I have to fill out a form to get this work done, but I don't know which form. I don't know where to get it. I don't know what the fields mean. Once I understand all that, I don't know who to give it to for authorization or who to give it to get the work done. And as the work's being done, I can't directly connect to the person performing the work and make him aware of changes or additional information. And so on. It's a big loss of productivity. And that was in forms. Now we add the forms loss of productivity with the straight data loss of productivity for like project plans or reports or proposals or responses to proposals and all that good stuff. It really gets to be a tremendous loss of productivity. So what we did is we created a front-end dashboard that would take forms, and sometimes forms can simply be Excel spreadsheets, and they could be entered into a database and stored into a database repository. Other forms that were, flat files could be stored in a flat file repository, and this became our library management. Infrastructure management. Once we were able to put together an infrastructure dashboard, of course, these were only documents, and metrics don't normally fall out of documents, but we were able to find that by looking at the people doing work, we could start to determine how much money we were spending for what. And that was kind of cool. The acquisition for infrastructure is acquisition, redeployment, termination, and then, of course, the infrastructure staff doing a whole bunch of work for everybody. So we determined the number of projects that were actually happening at one time or allocated, and then how many were active and how many were pending, and the number of people that would be assigned to these projects and what their average cost per hour was, and then the average hours spent on the projects, and then we started calculating average time, average cost, and then we started getting numbers. And then we were able to say, well, 75% of these are done, 65% of them are done. So by simple math and looking at the activity that was being performed, we ended up having a chart that management could look at and say, oh, that's what's going on with my infrastructure. Who knew? Then recovery management expenses were the same. How many DR tests do we have scheduled? These are new ones. How many repeat DR tests do we have? Every year you do a DR test, every 6 months, whatever. How many of them are completed? How many do we have? How many post-mortem meetings do we have? And what's the total cost all the way around? So again, we use numbers like that, and we're able to get cost and a chart. Now, let's look at business continuity and how it affects an enterprise. It starts out with a charter, and a charter is the direct responsibility of executive management. And its charter is to eliminate business interruptions and ensure the continuity of the business, to minimize financial impact from a disaster event, and adhere to legal and regulatory requirements. Sounds like 4 points then after that. But man, it is a difficult task, and sometimes these guys really earn their money. So now we're breaking it down into 3 categories. The disaster recovery is for information technology, mostly critical jobs, sensitive data, vital records management, and so on. Business is for locations or business sites or business units, where we take an inventory of the location and we put it into the asset management system, and we have a configuration management system that also says what's there. So we do business continuity and office recovery. Now, business continuity could have an evacuation plan and then office recovery that I'll go to a remote business location or have seats allocated, and my people could pick up their work from there. They could be connected to the production environment and resume work as normal. As you can see, there are a lot of interfaces involved when building a recovery plan, and everybody should be participating in this because it affects everyone. Executive management says, all right, we approve this project, we'll give you funding. Information technology supports the infrastructure for technology which supports the business. Company operations, which is the lines of business, not data processing operation. Auditing, finance, because a lot of financial problems here. Public relations, because if something happens, you have to speak to the rest of the world, and you want to project the right image. General service has to do with human resources and everything else. People are always involved, and facilities, because you may be having to worry about how do I establish my production facility, how do I establish my recovery, do I have redundant power, do I have redundant waters, HVAC, and all the other stuff that's involved. Now, establishing these interfaces with key departments will allow for the inclusion of corporate-wide recovery procedures. Also, security, salvage, and restoration, supplies, all that stuff have to be concerned. All right, so what do? We created an executive dashboard, and that executive dashboard, again, was based on enterprise resiliency and corporate certification. We then had an infrastructure dashboard so we could control the equipment and the resources within our world. We had a systems development lifecycle dashboard so we can control the application development and maintenance world. We had a recovery dashboard so we can protect the business going forward. And then we had a compliance dashboard so that we could comply to the laws and regulations of the countries where we did business. Now, a typical use of this dashboard would be from the executive. Somebody would tell me, I have an active disaster going on right now. Oh, he would go down to the disaster recovery and realize that there is a business location that has a problem. There's a fire at a location. He would then look at the recovery plan from there and see that steps are being done. When a step is completed, it's marked as green. When a step is active, it's marked as yellow. When a step has not been started yet, it's still red. So he would go down through the plan until he saw this yellow, and then look into the yellow and find out that they had evacuated the building and were now doing, they went to an assembly point and they're taking a head count and awaiting further instructions. But lo and behold, as in everything, problems do arise. And in this particular case, when they did the head count, 2 people were missing. So we generated an action item and sent that action item to the command center so that they would be aware of it and can take actions on their side and respond back to us with instructions. We also went over to the first responders and told the first responders of the missing people. And the fire department, first of all, police said nobody would pass our checkpoint. The emergency medical technician said we didn't take anybody to the hospital. So the fire department people stepped up and they said, well, it's pretty smoky in there. We're going to go back in and take a second look. So as this was all progressing, the fire department did find the people. They were unconscious, suffering from smoke inhalation, and they were taken to the hospital by emergency medical technicians and luckily recovered. Because of the fast actions that were taken, the company looked good in that situation. And executive management, because communication went from action item to the contingency command center, who informed the emergency operations center people, who informed the executive management. And since we want to project a single image to the rest of the world, the executive management or his communications liaison spoke with the media, clients, employees, the community, government, and families. Well, how did this all take place and what was the drill down process? So we started from an executive dashboard, and this executive dashboard is used to create enterprise resiliency and corporate certification. But in one of the phases, phase 6, you can either test or initiate a disaster event. In this case, we initiated a site recovery, and that was informed. The problem was forwarded on to the help desk. They told the contingent command center. Emergency operations was put in place. Recovery teams were started, and the recovery plan started. And as you can see, it was green till it got a red here, which was saying, oh, something's wrong here. And in that case, we had an action item. The action item looks like this, and it was sent to the contingent command center, who in turn told the emergency operations center, who in turn told executive management, and they in turn made the world aware of what was going on. Now for the infrastructure, we had another type of dashboard. So in this case, you're going from executive to infrastructure. The infrastructure is made up of acquisition, redeployment, termination, and the use of the infrastructure team to perform most of the functions. If you're in the process of building a new application or a new service and you need resources, then they have to be identified, and then the architect comes in and does a systems design or environmental design and points out the type of equipment you may need and how it should be connected. And an engineer would come in and say, all right, for that type of equipment, you need an external storage device. Here are the types that we recommend. Then you would the resource would be identified and ordered, because of the type you recommended, you go through a selection process. The resource is then delivered and installed. And once it's installed, inventory is updated for the global environment, and configuration management is updated for the site's environment. Well, now we've got it installed, and it was assigned to an employee. The employee either moved into a new job, left the company, whatever, but his terminal was now, it was ready for redeployment. But we couldn't keep his personal data or the programs that he had on there that were not necessary. So we had to erase the personal data and delete the unnecessary programs. Then we had to either move it to the new location or leave it where it is, but clean, and register that a new user is going to be using it, or it's at a new location, which required us to update the inventory and configuration. Termination, well, you still have to erase data, but in this case you have to erase the data to the Department of Defense standard. Especially this is a regulatory requirement. Financial data, medical data, can't have it available for somebody to pick off the drive. You can donate the equipment, sell it, or reuse it for DR. For example, in a business recovery situation, and you go into a business recovery site, or that business recovery site may be an internal site, you can stock it with your old equipment. Instead of having to buy new equipment, maybe it'll save you some money. Again, all the inventories have to be updated. And the infrastructure team, they perform the following. They pick up the equipment, they perform data erasures, they install, test, and report the status of equipment, and they respond to requests. How about production, systems development lifecycle? Well, there are forms used for the systems development lifecycle, as you can see, and it's for development, testing, quality assurance, production, acceptance, and then finally it's in production. So all of these forms can have either one or many forms associated with them. So you could build a menu of forms, which we do. We take from SDLC down to a menu. Then we go to the menu of development forms, which is a sub-menu from the main menu. Then we have another sub-menu for testing, quality assurance, and production acceptance. This can be used for version and release management. In the VM environment, lots of people are using VM as a way of copying a production environment and using that copy as a test environment for new developments, maintenance, or even recovery operations. So when you go through the quality assurance arena, you can provide them with the documentation saying we had a successful test and we had a successful recovery. So when the product goes into the production environment, there's a greater sense that it will work. Another thing you could do, which we found very helpful, was to say that any new order is a work order and any work done is a purchase order. So you can say, here are the subtasks that were done to satisfy this work order, and here's the cost associated based on the resources used and what their hourly rate may be or whatever. Okay, then you can tally it up and have a total cost. That can be used for a chargeback system, but it can really be used to help people who are planning a project, because most projects in the company are similar in nature. So you can go back to this system here and see what areas were responsible for achieving this goal and what was their average cost. So you can put that into your budget and plan for it better. Recovery dashboard. Now, recovery is based on a number of different things. One is there's a recovery planning. That's for IT and stuff like that. There's application certification for the applications, and there's business location certification. Now, let's go through them. The DR activation is basically recovery planning. That's the executive management dashboard where we have a plan for enterprise resiliency and corporate certification. It's comprised of 7 phases, each with 13 steps, for a total of 91 steps that have to be done. A risk analysis is part of it. Insurance policy and profile is generated from that. Audit, legal, compliance requirements are generated. The statement of work and a business plan are generated. We get a dedicated business continuity management organization built from it, and we have long-term management commitment to supporting recovery processing going forward. The system development lifecycle is altered to ensure that as new or maintained applications go through it, they are integrated with the recovery planning process, and version and release management is maintained at all times. All right, that's the environment. Now, application recovery, we have to select the recovery site and have to prepare it. Remember I said we had a pool of resources that were available. You have to take that pool and select from the pool the resources required for our recovery test or recovery activation. You have to select the application that's going to be recovered. You have to do an actual DR test and an activation, and then finally a postmortem. Now, the recovery set here, site preparation, means that I'm going to take your backup tape, bring it to my recovery site, and download it to the recovery site into a virtual tape library. In that case, data transfer back and forth would be less, use of bandwidth would be less, and your ability to keep the data in sync between the production site and the recovery site will be enhanced. Next, that data will go to a recovery point application, which is an application that takes snapshots of the production environment and copies them over to the recovery environment. And both the recovery environment and the production environment are kept in sync as far as data goes. Also, by using VMware, vSphere, and vConnect, you're able to do a site replication. So the site replication manager would interpret your site and make a VM replication of that, so that should you have a problem, they can restore your site automatically at the recovery center, synchronize the data, and then allow you to pick up operations just like you were at the production site. And what you would do then is use your actual job runbook to exercise the application. Now, for business locations, and this is called, you have failover, failback for high availability applications, and you have flip-flop for continuously available applications. Now, the difference is in flip-flop, you have an active environment where both environments in the recovery and the production are actually in sync with operations and data. And if Site A failed, you can flip instantaneously to Site B. And if you chose to run your production from Site B this month, and then Site A next month, you could flip-flop back and forth to do that. Now, a lot of people recommend you do that because it's the only way you can guarantee that both sites are always going to be working. Failover, failback is similar, except that there is a time span, maybe a very short time span, but there's a time span between when a recovery is declared and when the recovery is picked up at the recovery site. Business location. You do a business impact analysis to begin with, then you develop a business recovery site, which is an alternate site that the business unit can move their people to continue business. You have to perform workplace safety and violence prevention because terrorism is big. You have to build an evacuation plan. You have to build a business recovery and resumption plan. And you have to communicate with the government and the first responders and the salvage and restoration people and suppliers and a bunch of other vendors. Our dashboard looked pretty much like this. We had statements of work so people knew why we were here. We had training materials to get them up to speed. We have presentations that could help them understand how the products that are used in our company. Then we have exercise booklets. And then we have the 6 stages of disaster recovery that we wanted to go to. Recovery site infrastructure readiness, DR planning sessions, DR pre-test phases, DR application tests where they actually run with the application, a post-mortem or active DR post-test where we gather all the information about the test. We would compare estimated times against actual times, benchmarks, and both the production and the recovery site, any problems that were encountered, and any comments that were made by the people performing the test. All of that information would be assembled into a report and presentation to be provided at the post-mortem meeting where management and technical staff can meet to discuss what happened and make recommendations for improvement. Those recommendations that are selected would be added to the recovery process, and through this evolutionary process, eventually you'll build the best recovery plan for your organization. Plan, do, test, modify, plan, do, in a loop. Now, you have to adhere to compliance laws. What compliance laws do we have? Well, there's a lot of them. These are only some of them. So one of the things that the risk assessor would do would be to determine which laws your company has to adhere to in every country that you conduct business. That list will be generated, put into a spreadsheet. Then you would have another column to say, has an audit been done to say that we're adhering to this law? If yes, when? Was it successful? Yes or no? What exceptions and gaps do we have, or obstacles do we have? Are they being corrected? Yes, no. When are they going to be done? When's the next test? How do we gain certification? How do we get a letter of attestation generated that we are in compliance? So on and so forth. So this is the process, but it starts right here. Strategies for eliminating the audit exceptions, review the compliance, ensure data sensitivity. So you can walk through these steps, adhere to the system development lifecycle, and a lot of people today are saying, let's build adherence to compliance laws right into the application, and let's guarantee it within the system development lifecycle. Utilize automated tools whenever practical. There are a lot of them. There's an app scan product from IBM. There's, tons of products out there to help you build. You have elimination of single point of failure, because that's a definite bad situation. Inventory configuration, asset management, develop incident, problem, and crisis management, workflow and re-engineering, and implement and conduct training and awareness programs, because if you don't know you're in violation, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be fined. All right. That's the end of today's presentation, but if you want to see a demonstration of the dashboards, there is one available. It is online, and if you send me an email at bronacti@dchg.com, I'll be happy to send you the link. And if you have any questions that you'd like to see answered, forward your questions to me at, again, bronacti@dchg.com, and I will respond to all of your inquiries. Well, what's the next step? If you believe that this approach can help your company improve performance and bring products and services to market more rapidly, then please contact me. And again, you can call me or send me an email. I would love to assist you in integrating this approach within your environment. And remember, this approach uses your existing data, so you do not have to change information to adopt this product or this approach. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I certainly had a good time providing it to you. A lot of work, but just the same, it was fun. And I hope to see you all again, and I hope that I can communicate and provide you with services going forward. Have a nice day. Thank you.